concept. Thank you. Good evening, guys. So we are excited to be at this point in the study. It's been almost close to almost 10 months now since the beginning of when we started this. So, like Brandon said, this is the public involvement meeting, briefing you guys on how we got to where the concept is today and talk about the next steps as well. So we do have a short presentation, and then we had a meeting earlier today at noon, so this is the second of two meetings today for the public involvement, and really it's just a briefing on the study. So what we'll talk about is really what is a terminal planning study and why we do it. We'll talk about the schedule of the study and what that entailed, our site evaluation, and like Brandon mentioned while you guys are walking around, so the site evaluation really was identifying the pinch points in the terminal, and then the forecasts. The forecasts are a very important part of the study. That really shows the demand, the future demand on the terminal, and how many people are going to be walking through an airport terminal, and how big that terminal has to be in order to accommodate that demand. And then we'll get into our facility requirements, how much space will be needed, and then also our alternatives and preferred concept development. So a terminal planning study, so this is required by the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, when an airport is looking to seek federal funding for any type of terminal improvement. So there is a process that an airport must follow for the terminal planning study, and really what that consists of is what I just explained on what we're going to be going over tonight. So identifying existing conditions, looking at forecasts, looking at facility requirements, going through an extensive alternatives analysis, and then also look into implementation, financial feasibility, and also reaching out to the public too, and other stakeholders, which we did during the site evaluation. So your stakeholders are airlines, your rental car companies, concessionaires, any person or party or business who utilizes the airport. So we've been following this process throughout. We have been keeping the FAA informed on our progress. So we are going to be submitting this report to the FAA. And the goal of this is to get this on the terminal expansion program on the airport's capital improvement plan here in the future. So the overall process takes about 10 months with depending on review times. So there are one major FAA touch point. So when I say touch point, we need to coordinate with the FAA on and seek approval, and that's with the forecasting. So when we do our forecast, we have to submit that to the FAA, and they need to formally approve it. And sometimes that can take some time. We were lucky enough to receive approval within about a week after submission. So that really sped up. You see 12 months there, but we were able to cut some time off due to the forecasts being approved so quickly. So that was promising. But yeah, so right now we are in the last part, as you can see there, with public involvement meeting, and then the development and submittal of the terminal area study report. So we conducted a site evaluation study in January of this past year. We found a nice time when the weather was above 20 degrees, so we did find that was not planned. We were tracking the weather actually a couple weeks leading up, and it was like -15 here, but we found like the day that we came up here was miraculously 20 degrees. So anyway, what we found here when we were doing this, we had all of our MEP engineers come through, and they were evaluating the current systems. And then we had an architect and myself. I was looking at how passengers interact with the facility, measuring queue times for how long people wait in lines at the checkpoint, the ticketing area during peak times, which at that morning was early in the morning at like 4 in the morning. And then also seeing how the baggage works too behind the house, and seeing how beyond security, how passengers interact with the departure lounges and with the circulation corridors and such. So what came about of that site evaluation on the upstairs, the second level, was at the checkpoint. If you guys have flown through Fargo in the morning or during peak times, you can see at the security checkpoint that the queuing can sometimes back up all the way to the vertical circulation by the elevators and the escalators. That can be a pretty big safety hazard. So that was a eye-opening right there, looking at ways that we could potentially mitigate that in the future. And then also beyond security, look at the departure lounges. So the departure lounges, right now, how they are configured is they have the circulation for passengers cutting right between the departure lounges and then also in between the boarding bridges and the departure lounges. So when there's a gate that is boarding and passengers are trying to go past that gate to another gate, there can become a lot of gridlock and a lot of congestion. A lot of people can be standing around, and you have a lot of crowds forming. So that was a big thing to keep an eye on as well. Another thing too is here at Fargo currently there's about a 70%, 30% concessions split. So about 70% of the concessions program is pre-security, 30% is post-security. So typically nowadays, ever since 9/11, passengers like to get through security. They like to be at the gate, have a viewing angle of their gate, and spend their money on the other side of the security checkpoint. So we're looking at flipping that split to have more concessions on post-security. On the downstairs, the ticketing area, the back of the house, behind ticketing area, what we call outbound baggage area. So that is the area where your bags go after they get screened through TSA. It is a little tight back there, and then as demand continues to grow here, that's just going to amplify. So looking at ways that we could improve and expand the outbound baggage screening area. In the ticketing area, go back to if you guys have ever traveled here during a peak time, you can see that sometimes the queuing really does snake around out to baggage claim. Looking at ways that we can improve the ticketing area room to provide more queuing space. So those high level, those are the biggest pinch points during our site evaluation. So also during this, we had the opportunity to speak to every airline that serves Fargo, which was fantastic and great insight on not only what they need currently, but also give us some insight on, this is a potential growth scenario at the airport. This is the type of facility that we would need to accommodate that growth. So we were able to speak to some corporate real estate folks of those airlines, which provide insight into what type of ticketing area facility they need, departure lounge, and baggage area as well. So that was very helpful. We also spoke to rental car companies, concessionaires, TSA. TSA was a big partner in this as well when we were talking about the checkpoint and the baggage screening room. All right, so then the next part of this is get into the forecast. And the forecast is taken on an overall annual employment level. So those values that you see are the amount of employments or departing passengers that the airport sees in a year. This is important because this will then funnel down into another metric that I'll show in the next slide, which is your peak hour, and that's really what sizes the facility. So what goes into the forecast? Well, it really is the economics of the region that the airport serves or its catchment area. So we look at population levels, we look at employment levels, and also the type of money and levels of money that gets spent in the area. Those are good indicators on how passenger activity is going to grow or not grow over the years. So with a 20-year outlook, we are looking at a 2.12% annual growth rate through 2041. Just like every airport in the country, COVID had a big impact on passenger activity levels. So forecasting it's a challenging time for forecasting right now because you're looking into a crystal ball, especially with the airlines and the pilot shortages that's going on, what the airlines are facing and going through. There's some other variables that were considered. So in 2021, the airport had about 399,000 enplanements. And they had a very strong recovery, faster than what was originally anticipated at the beginning of the pandemic. Through 2022, through July, I believe we're up 23%, so still a healthy recovery. And then through 2041, we're looking at 750,000 enplanements. So now what does that mean from a terminal standpoint? Well, the terminal is sized off of their peak hour. So what we do here is we had to look at the schedules in 2021. We also looked at 2019 because that was the last full year of base year of data to determine the average day of the peak month to determine your peak hours. So that was in March. March is the peak month, and then I believe it was a Thursday in March. That was the average day. And you figure out the peak hour based off of that schedule of that day. So in 2019, that peak hour is around 352 enplanements. The time of day varied. Sometimes it was, depending on the day of the week, it was early in the morning. Other days of the week, when there was an Allegiant flight taking off mid-morning, it was around 10 a.m., 11 a.m., but it was around 352 enplanements. Now that forecasted goes about 558 enplanements. So it does shoot up quite a bit, and that is the metric that we use to do our space requirements. So now what we do is we use that 550 enplanements, and then we put it into a model that helps make the passengers enjoy their experience. So what I mean by that is a level of service. We design to an appropriate level of service that doesn't make you wait in line so long while you're at the airport, and also gives you enough space while you're waiting in line or while you're waiting for your gate. So these are industry standards. High level description of this is if you are, for example, going through the checkpoint, you don't have pre-check, you're a standard passenger, we don't want you waiting in line for more than 10 minutes. So how many checkpoint lanes are we going to need for you not to wait in line for 10 minutes? If you are a pre-check, we don't want you waiting in line for more than 5 minutes. How much space are we going to need for that pre-check lane, as well as how much for queuing space? So that type of methodology and thinking goes down all the way from the check-in. So, when you're waiting in line for a ticketing area and you use a full service counter, how many full service positions do we need to provide? How much queuing, and how many kiosks, etc. So we have that type of methodology for everything that every processing component of the terminal, and then baggage claim as well. We do that. Depending if it's a major international airport, we get into passport control and customs and all that stuff. So once we apply those metrics, we come up with our terminal program. This is the program that we came up with Fargo. So currently we have about 116,000 square foot terminal. That's including all levels, including the basement. We did include the basement because they do house MEP equipment down there. And when you see the X's and the check marks, well, first you see the existing column here that shows where it is today. The recommended is if you look at the current demand today, with the existing square footage, and the existing passenger demand, what it should be at. So currently today, you have baggage claim devices, free security food and retail is sufficient, and support and storage for concessions. And then the program takeoffs is looking down the line how much space we're going to need based off of that future peak hour of 500, a little over 530 enplanements. You guys feel free to ask questions throughout, or you can wait till the end. So once we have our terminal program, then we can start developing our alternatives. So like I said before, during our site evaluation, a big focus was going to be on the checkpoint and on the circulation, because that's where a lot of the congestion occurs. So here are some pictures of the queuing backing up to the elevator, and also passengers when they're at the concessions by gate 4, and people are trying to go to gate 5. While there's some people at gate 4 and at the concessions, it does become congested there. So we really wanted to focus on the circulation around the checkpoint and the checkpoint itself, because we still have that queuing issue that goes back to the elevator and escalator. So we came up with 3 options, and what you see here is you see those blue dashed lines. That is where the circulation corridor is going to be for the passengers for all 3 options. So the first option in our program, we are looking to accommodate a 4th lane for the checkpoint, because that's what the demand calls to help mitigate excess queuing at the checkpoint. So we need to preserve space for a 4th lane. The first option looked at keeping the checkpoint in its existing location, adding a 4th lane, and having circulation going around the checkpoint. what that required was us for the queuing space to bump into the current secure area. So where there's currently departure lounge space, we'd have to change that whole configuration to use that space for queuing. And you still are snaking around the checkpoint. So there's still potential for gridlock up in this area. The second option, we maintain this existing facade over by where gate 1 is. We relocated gate 1 to the new concourse. So the new concourse, our program called for 4 additional gates. So we did provide an expansion out to the east for 4 gates. We relocated gate 1 here, but we still have a snake of the circulation. So we actually in this option as well, we relocated the checkpoint to where currently the pre-secure concessions are. So when you go up the escalators, you would take a right and go through the checkpoint that way. And then after the checkpoint, you would take a left to go to the main circulation, but you're still sneaking here a little bit. So that was a con of that option. And then option 3 kind of combines option 2 with going out to having the checkpoint relocated to the pre-secure concessions, but it straightens this entire corridor out. So when the passengers come out the checkpoint, they can look down each end of the concourse. So this is a 35-foot bump out from the existing facade, just so that we can have a straight circulation here. And that circulation goes beyond the departure lounges, so there'll never be backup from passengers flowing out into the circulation corridor. We redesignate the current security checkpoint. Actually, I think I'll do this next slide. Here we go. So we redesignate the current checkpoint area into post-secure concessions. That is, I think, strategically, and from a revenue generating standpoint for the airport, you have 4 gates that are located in this area. So having a restaurant, a bar area for passengers while they're waiting for their gates, having that viewing angle from this concessions point would be very helpful and be a good experience for the passengers, as well as they're having those view out to the airfield. And then we also have on the concourse, the new concourse, airport administration, so these offices will be relocated over to the new section. And we are also preserving space for additional concessions down here, a restroom module which includes animal relief areas, some other nursing stations, family restrooms, and then also space for a sensory room, for a kids play area, or a business lounge as well. So this option really opens up the viewing angle of passengers when they're going down the circulation corridor, helps out wayfinding, and all passengers when they get off their plane would be exiting right here. So there would only be 1 exit lane versus the 2 that we currently have today. Another feature as well that we're looking at, we're talking to the Customs Border Patrol right now, is having a hybrid FIS, Federal Inspection Services, area in the terminal expansion as well on the west side. So what we would do is have the option, if Frontier or Allegiant or another new entrant comes into the market and wants to provide service to Mexico or another international destination, we could close off Gate 5 and make this whole area sterile. And then passengers would be able to use this area right here, go down into baggage claim, and then this baggage carousel would be able to be closed off with a partition wall, a removable partition wall, and then that whole area would be sterile to process international arriving passengers. So we also are preserving space for 3 detaining rooms and also a vertical circulation corridor there. On the lower level, improvements include a lot of back-of-house improvements with baggage screening expansion, outbound baggage makeup area expansion, and also more depth in the ticketing area as well. We're pushing the ticket counters back 5 feet to provide more queuing depth. It would help out. It'll help out the queuing a little bit there. And we are also proposing to expand the head house or expand the terminal 60 feet out to the east, so that can provide up to 26 ticket counters. Right now, currently, the airport is almost at capacity with ticket counter space, so that extra ticket counters will be able to accommodate any new entrants or expansion of existing carriers. And that's where we're at. So here are some massing diagrams of what it could look like looking southwest. And then looking up to the northwest from the tower's point of view. And that's all we had to share. So yeah, the format of this was, if you guys wanted to walk around the boards, ask any questions, feel free. Brandon, do you want to go over the schedule real quick on like what this can look like from a design construction standpoint?
Yeah, so right now we are just rounding to the end of the study, which will be done at the end of October. And then selection of architect engineer. Also, this is going to be a construction manager at risk contract setup. So we started selecting or putting together a contract, putting together a contract and an RFP for selection of a construction manager. And then it is anticipated about a year of design. So this next year we'll be going through our with lots of input from stakeholders, user groups, schematic design, design development, and construction documents with milestones along the way, and then starting construction in 2024, spring 2024. And that'll be multi-phase. So that could be, depending on how one of the reasons we're bringing on a construction manager is to make sure that we get a phasing program or a phasing plan that is right to make sure that all the critical operations and components of the terminal stay up and operational, mitigate disruption during construction. So it could take from 3 to 4 years.